I think I didn't do anything wrong. Just told him the truth. If he couldn't handle me staying with my ex when I visit the city, he could leave. But when he handed me the divorce papers, everyone acted like I was the monster. All I wanted was trust in our marriage. Apparently, he saw betrayal instead. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The kitchen felt smaller than usual as I stood at the counter, my phone buzzing with another text from Liam. Nate sat across from me at our breakfast table, his coffee growing cold, while he stared at me with those wounded eyes I'd grown so tired of seeing. "Althea, we need to talk about this," Nate said, his voice carrying that careful tone he used when he was trying not to start a fight. "I'm not comfortable with you staying overnight at Liam's place every time you go to the city for work." I rolled my eyes, not bothering to hide my irritation. "Nathaniel, we've been through this a dozen times. Liam is my friend. We dated in college. That was over 10 years ago. You're being paranoid." "It's not paranoia when my wife is sleeping at another man's apartment," he replied, his jaw tightening. "There are hotels, Althea. Your company has a travel budget." "Hotels are expensive and impersonal. Liam has a couch and it's perfectly innocent." I turned to face him fully, crossing my arms. "Besides, I shouldn't have to justify my friendships to you. That's not what marriage is supposed to be about." Chloe wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Why are you and Daddy talking so loud?" "We're just having a discussion, sweetheart," I said, softening my voice. "Go get dressed for school." After she left, Nate leaned forward. "This isn't about control, Althea. It's about respect. How would you feel if I stayed overnight at my ex-girlfriend's place?" "That's different," I snapped. "You don't have any ex-girlfriends you're still friends with. And even if you did, I'd trust you because that's what married people do." "Trust goes both ways," he said quietly. "And right now, I feel like you're choosing him over our marriage." I slammed my coffee mug down harder than necessary. "That's ridiculous, Nate. You're being insecure and controlling. If you can't handle me having male friends, maybe you should examine why you're so threatened." My phone buzzed again. Liam's name lit up the screen. "Looking forward to seeing you next week. I'll make sure the couch is comfortable." I quickly replied, "Can't wait." Nate's being ridiculous about it again. "Who are you texting?" Nate asked. "Maya," I lied smoothly. "She agrees that you're being unreasonable about this whole thing." That afternoon, I called my sister from my office at the marketing firm. Maya had always been my biggest supporter, and I needed someone to validate what I already knew, that Nate was being completely irrational. "He's being so old-fashioned," I told her, spinning in my desk chair. "It's 2024, not 1954. I should be able to have friendships without my husband acting like I'm cheating." "Absolutely," Maya agreed immediately. "You're an independent woman, Althea. You don't need his permission to see your friends. Honestly, it sounds like he's trying to isolate you." "That's what I thought too. Liam and I have been friends since college. We have history, but it's ancient history. Nate should trust me." "Maybe this is his way of showing you that he doesn't see you as an equal partner," Maya suggested. "Some men can't handle strong women who don't ask permission for everything." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "You're probably right. I'm going to stand my ground on this. If he can't handle me staying with Liam, that's his problem to work through." When I got home that evening, Nate was helping Chloe with her homework at the dining room table. I could feel the tension radiating from him, but I refused to acknowledge it. Instead, I busied myself preparing dinner, humming softly to show how unaffected I was by his mood. "Mommy," Chloe said during dinner, "Sarah's parents are getting divorced. She says they fight all the time." I felt Nate's eyes on me, but I kept my voice light. "That's sad, honey. But every family is different. Some people just aren't good at communicating." After Chloe went to bed, Nate tried again. "Althea, please, I'm asking you to consider how this looks, how it makes me feel. Can't you at least book a hotel room?" I turned to face him. decision crystallizing in my mind. No, Nate, I'm not going to change my plans because you're insecure. Liam is offering me a place to stay, and I'm accepting. If you can't handle that, if you can't trust me after 8 years of marriage, then maybe we have bigger problems than I thought. His face went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you can't accept me staying at my friend's place when I visit the city, then maybe you should leave. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. I won't be controlled in my own marriage. Nate stared at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Is that really what you want, Althea? An ultimatum? It's not an ultimatum, I said, though we both knew it was. It's me being honest about what I need in this relationship, trust and respect for my independence. He nodded slowly, then walked upstairs without another word. I heard his office door close, and I felt a mixture of victory and unease. But I pushed the unease away. I was right about this. I had to be. The next morning, I found Nate in the kitchen making coffee, his movements mechanical and distant. Chloe was unusually quiet at breakfast, glancing between us with worried eyes. I'm going to the city next Tuesday, I announced, spreading jam on my toast. I'll be staying at Liam's as planned. Nate didn't respond, just nodded and continued eating his cereal. His silence felt different somehow, not angry or hurt, but resolved. It should have been a relief, but something about it made my stomach twist. After he left for work, I called Maya again. I think I got through to him, I told her. He's finally accepting that I'm not going to change my mind about this. Good for you, Maya said. You can't let him dictate your friendships. That's how controlling relationships start. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted. Nate's mother, Karen, called that afternoon, her voice tight with disapproval. Althea, dear, I hope you're considering the impact this is having on your family, she said in that passive-aggressive way of hers. Karen, with all due respect, this is between Nate and me, I replied coolly. I'm not doing anything wrong by maintaining friendships. Of course not, dear, she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. I just worry about Chloe. She's been asking her grandmother why Mommy and Daddy seem sad lately. After I hung up, I found myself staring at my phone, Liam's contact information glowing on the screen. I typed out a message. Looking forward to next week. Thanks for being such a good friend through all this drama. His response came quickly. Always here for you, Al. Nate doesn't know what he has. I smiled at that, feeling validated. At least someone appreciated me for who I was, without trying to change me or control me. I screenshot our conversation, not sure why, but wanting to preserve this moment of understanding. That evening, I overheard Chloe talking to her stuffed animals in her room. Mommy and Daddy are fighting again. I think Daddy is sad. Maybe if I'm extra good, they'll stop. My heart clenched, but I pushed the guilt away. This was Nate's fault for making such a big deal out of nothing. Once he accepted my friendship with Liam, everything would go back to normal. I was sure of it. Tuesday morning arrived with unusual tension. Nate had barely spoken to me over the weekend, maintaining a polite but distant demeanor that somehow felt worse than his earlier protests. As I packed my overnight bag, I caught him watching me from the doorway. I'll be back tomorrow evening, I said, folding my favorite silk blouse. Chloe has soccer practice at 4. I'll handle it, he replied simply. No arguments, no pleas for me to reconsider. Just quiet acceptance that felt strangely hollow. The train ride to the city gave me time to think, and I found myself texting Liam. On my way. Thanks again for letting me crash at your place. Can't wait to see you, he replied. I got that wine you like. I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement I hadn't experienced in months. When had Nate stopped making me feel special like this? When had our marriage become so routine, so suffocating? Liam's downtown apartment was exactly as I remembered. Modern, sophisticated, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He greeted me with a warm hug that lasted just a moment longer than necessary. You look amazing, Al, he said, using the nickname only he had ever called me. Marriage is treating you well. Some days better than others, I replied, accepting the glass of wine he offered. Thanks for letting me stay. Nate was being difficult about it. His loss, Liam said with that charming smile that had captured my attention in college. A man should trust his wife. We talked for hours, reminiscing about college, discussing our careers, carefully avoiding the obvious tension between us. When my phone rang at 9 p.m., Nate's name appeared on the screen. I should take this, I said, but made no move to answer. Everything okay at home? Liam asked when the ringing stopped. Fine. He's probably just checking in. But when he called again 10 minutes later, I felt a stab of irritation. I texted instead, busy with work colleagues. Talk tomorrow. The lie came so easily it surprised me. More wine? Liam offered, and I accepted, feeling rebellious and free in a way I hadn't in years. We moved to the couch, ostensibly to watch a movie, but found ourselves talking instead. About dreams we'd given up, paths not taken, the weight of responsibility and routine. Somewhere during our third glass of wine, his hand found mine. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together? He asked softly. I should have pulled my hand away, should have reminded him I was married, that this was exactly the kind of conversation that would validate Nate's concerns. Instead, I found myself saying, sometimes. When I woke up the next morning, I was still on the couch, covered with a blanket. Liam was in the kitchen making coffee, fully dressed for work. Sleep okay? He asked casually, as if nothing had happened. And technically, nothing had. We'd just talked. Fallen asleep talking. That wasn't cheating. Fine, I said, checking my phone. 3 missed calls from Nate, 2 from his mother. I should probably head back soon. Of course, but Al. He turned to face me. You know you're welcome here any time, right? You don't need anyone's permission to visit a friend. On the train home, I crafted my story carefully. Work had run late. I'd been exhausted, fallen asleep on Liam's couch watching TV. All technically true. When Nate picked me up at the station, his face was carefully neutral. How was your trip? He asked. Productive. The presentation went well. Another lie by omission. You didn't answer when I called. I was in meetings, then exhausted. I crashed early. I looked out the window, avoiding his eyes. How was Chloe? She missed you. Asked why Mommy couldn't call to say goodnight. Guilt twisted in my stomach, but I pushed it down. I'll make it up to her. That weekend, Maya came for dinner, and I found myself telling her about the trip over wine while Nate put Chloe to bed. It sounds like you had a good time, she said, refilling our glasses. You seem lighter somehow. It was nice to feel appreciated, I admitted. Liam actually listens when I talk. He doesn't make me feel guilty for having opinions or wanting independence. That's what you deserve, Maya said firmly. A partner who supports you, not one who tries to control you. When Nate came downstairs, the conversation shifted to safer topics, but I caught him watching me with a strange expression. Later, as we got ready for bed, he tried once more. Althea, I've been thinking about what you said, about trust and respect. Maybe we should talk to someone, a counselor or... I don't need counseling, Nate. I need a husband who trusts me. I turned away from him, pulling on my pajamas. I'm not the problem here. He was quiet for a long moment. No, I suppose you're not. Something in his tone made me look at him, but his expression was unreadable. He kissed my forehead goodnight, a gesture that felt more like goodbye than affection. Over the next few weeks, I found myself texting Liam more frequently. Nothing inappropriate, just friendly conversation that gradually became more personal. He understood me in ways Nate never had, appreciated my ambition, my independence. Nate seems distant lately, I mentioned during one of our phone calls. Maybe he's finally realizing he can't control you, Liam suggested. Some men can't handle strong women. Maybe, I agreed, though something felt off about the whole situation. When I announced my next trip to the city, Nate simply nodded. No arguments, no requests for compromise. Just quiet acceptance that should have felt like victory, but somehow felt like loss. "Will you call this time?" he asked. "Chloe worries when she doesn't hear from you." "Of course," I promised, meaning it. But when the time came, when I was back in Liam's apartment with wine and conversation and the intoxicating feeling of being truly seen, I let the calls go to voicemail again. This time, when I woke up on his couch, there was a moment of confusion, a memory of his lips on mine that I quickly dismissed as a wine-fueled dream. "Thanks for listening," I told him as I gathered my things. "You're a good friend, Liam." "The best kind of friend," he agreed, his smile holding secrets I wasn't ready to examine. On the train home, I deleted the call log from my phone and practiced my story. But when I walked into our house, Nate was waiting with a stack of papers in his hand. Phone bills, credit card statements, rideshare receipts. "We need to talk," he said quietly, and I realized that my carefully constructed narrative was about to crumble. "What is this supposed to be?" I asked, glancing at the papers Nate had spread across our dining room table. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady, even slightly amused. "Are you seriously going through our bills looking for evidence of something?" "These are rideshare receipts, Althea. Drop-offs at Liam's apartment at 11:47 p.m. and 1:23 a.m. on your last 2 trips. His voice was calm, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been yelling. "And this is our phone bill, showing calls to and from his number, some lasting hours." I laughed, a sound that came out more brittle than I intended. "So now you're spying on me?" "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Nate. This paranoid, controlling behavior." "I'm not being paranoid when the evidence is right here," he said, pointing to a highlighted line item. "You told me you were going to bed early, but you were at a wine bar 3 blocks from his apartment until after midnight." "I can't believe you're tracking my spending like I'm some kind of criminal," I shot back, gathering up the papers. "This is insane, Nate. These are innocent explanations for everything." Before he could respond, my phone rang. It was Sarah, one of our couple friends, calling about dinner plans for the weekend. I answered with forced brightness, making sure Nate could hear every word. "Of course we'll be there. We're looking forward to it. 8 o'clock at Romano's." "Perfect." After I hung up, Nate shook his head. "Althea, we can't just pretend this conversation didn't happen." "There's nothing to pretend about," I said firmly. "You're seeing problems that don't exist. But fine, if you want to embarrass yourself in front of our friends by acting jealous and suspicious, that's your choice." Saturday evening at Romano's, I made sure to look perfect. I wore the red dress Nate had always complimented, styled my hair the way he liked it, and smiled brightly as we joined Sarah and Mike, along with 2 other couples from our neighborhood. The conversation flowed easily at first: work, kids, vacation plans. But I could feel Nate's tension beside me, and I decided to address it head-on. "You know," I said during a lull in conversation, reaching for my wine glass, "Nate's been having some trust issues lately. He's convinced that my friendship with an old college friend is somehow inappropriate." Sarah raised her eyebrows. "Oh no, one of those situations?" "Exactly," I continued, ignoring Nate's sharp look. "I stay at Liam's place when I travel to the city for work. He has a perfectly comfortable couch, and it saves the company money. But apparently, that makes me some kind of adulteress." The table laughed, and I felt a surge of satisfaction. Mike clapped Nate on the shoulder. "Come on, man. You can't be serious about this." "It's not that simple," Nate said quietly, but I talked over him. "He's been going through our phone bills, tracking my rideshare receipts, basically treating me like a teenager who can't be trusted." I shook my head with exaggerated disappointment. I never thought I'd married someone so insecure. "That's not what's happening here," Nate tried again, his voice strained. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "Then explain to everyone why you think your wife can't have male friends. Explain why you think I need your permission to stay at a friend's apartment instead of an expensive hotel." The table was getting uncomfortable now, but I pressed on. "I mean, what's next? Am I not allowed to work late with male colleagues? Can't have lunch with male clients? Althea, please, Nate said, and I could hear the embarrassment in his voice. Good. Maybe now he'd understand how his accusations made me feel. No, I think this is important, I continued. In 2024, are we really still dealing with men who can't handle confident, independent women? Who think marriage means ownership? Jennifer, Mike's wife, nodded supportively. You're absolutely right. Trust is the foundation of any good marriage. Exactly. I raised my glass. To trust, and to husbands who don't treat their wives like property. Everyone except Nate raised their glasses. He sat there, staring at the tablecloth, his face flushed with humiliation. I felt a moment of guilt but pushed it away. He'd brought this on himself with his paranoid behavior. I need some air, Nate said suddenly, standing up. Oh, come on, I called after him as he walked toward the restaurant's exit. Don't be dramatic. But when I looked around the table, I realized that Karen, who had joined us late, was no longer in her seat either. Through the restaurant's large windows, I could see her outside with Nate, her arm around his shoulders as he leaned against the building wall. My stomach dropped. They were both crying. Maybe you should go check on him, Sarah suggested gently. He's fine, I said, taking another sip of wine. He just needs to process what I said. Sometimes the truth is hard to hear. But Maya, who had been unusually quiet, leaned over and whispered, Maybe you were a little harsh, Althea. Was I? I looked around the table, suddenly noticing that the supportive atmosphere had shifted. People were checking their phones, avoiding eye contact. I was just being honest about what I've been dealing with. Mike cleared his throat. Look, Althea, we all like you both, but maybe this is something you should work out privately. There's nothing to work out, I insisted. Either he trusts me or he doesn't. When Nate came back inside, his face was composed but distant. He sat down without looking at me and quietly asked the server for the check. We should probably head home, he said to the table. Thank you all for a lovely evening. The ride home was silent except for the radio. I kept glancing at Nate, waiting for him to say something, to acknowledge that maybe he'd overreacted, that my friends had validated my position, but he just drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Well, I finally said as we pulled into our driveway. Are you going to admit that maybe you've been unreasonable about this whole thing? He turned off the car and sat for a moment in the darkness. No, Althea, I don't think I have been. Did you not hear what everyone said in there? They all agreed that... They agreed because you made it impossible for them to do anything else, he interrupted. You humiliated me in front of our friends, made me look like a controlling monster, and twisted the situation to make yourself look like a victim. I didn't twist anything, I protested. I told them the truth. Did you tell them about the late-night phone calls, the wine bar receipts, the fact that you've been lying to me about your activities? His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it now. Did you mention any of that? Those things are innocent, and you know it. He nodded slowly, then got out of the car. As we walked to the front door, he said quietly, I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow, Althea. I stopped walking. You're what? I said I'm meeting with a lawyer. I think it's time we discussed our options. Options for what? He unlocked the front door and held it open for me. For ending this marriage before it gets any worse. I stared at him, speechless for the first time in weeks. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. He was supposed to back down, apologize, accept my friendship with Liam. He wasn't supposed to escalate to lawyers. You're being ridiculous, I finally managed. You can't be serious about this. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, he said, and walked upstairs to his office, leaving me standing alone in our foyer, finally understanding that I had miscalculated everything. I barely slept that night, replaying Nate's words over and over. He couldn't be serious about seeing a lawyer. This was just another manipulation tactic, a way to scare me into backing down about Liam. By morning, I'd convinced myself that he was bluffing, but when I came downstairs for coffee, I found him in the kitchen with his laptop open, a legal pad covered in notes beside him. He was dressed for work, but had clearly been up for hours. "Good morning," I said carefully, trying to gauge his mood. "Morning." He didn't look up from his screen. I poured my coffee and sat across from him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he was avoiding my eyes. "Nate, about last night." "I have an appointment at 10, he said, closing the laptop. "With Patterson and Associates." My stomach clenched. Patterson and Associates was the firm that had handled my friend Lisa's divorce. They were expensive, thorough, and ruthless. "You're actually serious about this?" "Yes." "Over a friendship?" I tried to keep my voice light, reasonable. "Nate, you're talking about destroying our family because you can't handle me having a male friend." He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my breath catch. Not anger, not hurt, resignation. "Is that really what you think this is about?" "What else could it be about?" He reached for his phone, scrolled through something, then set it on the table between us. It was open to my text conversation with Liam from 2 weeks ago. "Can't wait to see you next week. Nate's being ridiculous about it again." "Looking forward to it too. You deserve better than his jealousy, Al." "Sometimes I think you're the only one who really understands me." "I've always understood you. That's never changed." My heart stopped. "How did you left your iPad on the counter. The messages sync automatically." His voice was steady, matter of fact. "There are more, Althea. Weeks of them." I grabbed the phone, scrolling through conversations I'd forgotten about, seeing them now through his eyes. The growing intimacy, the complaints about our marriage, the way Liam and I had gradually crossed lines I hadn't even realized we were approaching. "These are just friendly conversations," I said weakly. "Are they?" He took the phone back, scrolled to a more recent exchange. "Here's one from last Tuesday. Wish I could stay longer. I feel more like myself when I'm with you." And his response, "You know you're welcome here any time, in any capacity." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. That doesn't mean anything inappropriate happened, doesn't it? He pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed before. Bank statements showing charges at a lingerie store the day before your last trip. Hotel receipts, not for staying, but for day rates. 3 hours on a Tuesday afternoon. The blood drained from my face. I'd forgotten about that afternoon, the way one glass of wine had led to another, how we'd ended up in that hotel room convincing ourselves we were just talking, just being close, that it didn't count as cheating because we had history. "Nate, I can explain." "Can you?" He spread more papers across the table. Phone records showing calls that lasted until 3 in the morning. Credit card charges for expensive dinners for 2. A rideshare receipt showing you left his apartment at 6 a.m. last month, not the evening before like you told me. I stared at the evidence of my deception laid out like a prosecutor's case. When had I become so careless, so sloppy with my lies? "It's not what you think," I tried desperately. "Yes, we've gotten close, but..." "But what, Althea?" For the first time, his composure cracked, and I heard the pain underneath. "But it doesn't count because you have history. But it's not really cheating because you're not happy in our marriage. What's the excuse this time?" "There is no excuse because nothing happened." The lie exploded out of me with desperate force. "You're seeing things that aren't there, making connections that don't exist." He stared at me for a long moment, then reached for his phone again. This time, he played an audio message. Liam's voice filled the kitchen. "Last night was incredible, Al. I've missed you more than I realized. I know this is complicated, but I think we should talk about what this means for your future." I felt the world tilt around me. I'd forgotten about that voicemail, forgotten that I'd saved it because it made me feel wanted, desired in a way I hadn't felt in years. "When?" Nate asked quietly. "When what?" "When did you decide our marriage wasn't worth fighting for? When did you decide I wasn't worth the truth?" Tears started flowing, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt or from being caught. "Nate, please. We can work through this. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." "Months of moments," he corrected. "Months of lies, of making me feel crazy for trusting my instincts. Months of you coming home from his bed and sleeping in mine. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? He leaned forward, and I saw the man I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago, asking for one last chance to understand. Help me understand how this happened, Althea. Help me understand how we got here. I opened my mouth, but no words came. How could I explain the gradual erosion of boundaries, the way excitement had felt like love, the way I'd convinced myself I deserved more than what our marriage offered? How could I admit that I'd thrown away our family for the thrill of feeling young and desired again? I never meant for it to happen, I whispered finally, but it did happen. Yes. And you lied about it. Yes. And when I asked you directly, you made me feel like a paranoid monster for questioning you. I couldn't speak, could only nod. He gathered up the papers, put them back in the folder. I'm filing for divorce, Althea, and I'm asking for primary custody of Chloe. You can't, the words burst out of me. You can't take my daughter away because of this. I'm not taking her away. I'm protecting her from the chaos you've created. He stood up, straightening his tie. My lawyer will be in touch about temporary arrangements. I suggest you find your own representation. Nate, please, we can go to counseling. We can work through this. No. The finality in his voice stopped me cold. You made your choice, Althea. You chose him over our family. Now you get to live with the consequences. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. I'll be staying at my mother's until we can work out a custody schedule. I'll pick up Chloe after school and bring her back tomorrow morning. You can't just leave. I'm not leaving, he said quietly. I left months ago, emotionally. I just didn't realize it until now. You've been gone even longer. After he left, I sat alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my betrayal, finally understanding that my carefully constructed justifications had crumbled into dust. And for the first time in months, I had no idea what to do next. The sound of Chloe's footsteps on the stairs reminded me that I wasn't the only casualty in this war I'd started. I was going to have to explain to my 8-year-old daughter why Daddy wouldn't be living with us anymore. And I had no idea how to make that sound like anyone's fault but my own.